all of St. Anthony, southern half of New Brighton, south of 694. It's a unique mix of a first-ring suburb that has a large group of, a demographically large group of conservatives that are Lutheran and Catholic and Union people who would never vote for the Republican Party, and a large group of Democrats who are, I'm finding them out there very disgusted with their political party and are looking for an alternate choice to vote for on election day.
All right. And why are you running for State House, Tim?
Back in 2002, I started getting involved in politics. I decided to go down to the Capitol to find out how everything works. I learned real quickly that I didn't like what I was noticing down there. And in 2007, I was surfing the internet in November and I ran across this story about some guy in Congress named Ron Paul who voted by himself a lot. And I thought nobody does that, so I did some research and found out somebody actually does vote by themselves in Congress. That inspired me to get involved in the Republican Party in 2007's election cycle. So I went from knowing nothing, skyrocketing at 100 miles an hour into the political process all the way to the state, as a delegate to the state convention. That's what got me going. And then as I got more deeply involved in the process, the political process, I learned a lot that I didn't like, and I continued to run as a candidate. It's my fourth run is for the House seat in this district.
All right, great. And if elected, how would you expand the liberty movement or liberty ideas in your area or across the state?
We have a constitution that clearly defines, and so right here's a copy of it for anybody who wants to see it. It clearly defines and is designed to limit government and its force against the people. We currently live under a reverse of this, where this document is actually being used against the people. We need people elected to public office, especially at the state level, who understand this document and understand the purpose of it, and actually will comply and fight with it. For 7 years now in my district, I have been on the Charter Commission, these other organizations, and I've had to fight my way through the process and standing on principles of the Constitution against liberals and sometimes conservatives, because at the end of the day, we seem to have larger government no matter what demographic group is in charge at the Capitol, if you go back and look. And so my purpose would be to educate the people, which I do every time I talk to somebody. I start out with the preamble, the state constitution, and I weave our conversation into constitutional principles, letting them know that this is where I stand and this is how I stand and vote when I'm in office. Currently, as a charter commission member.
And what city is that for the area?
Columbia Heights.
Columbia Heights.
A real quick side note: every year we have elections for president and vice president, and this year I was elected the vice president in a group of 9 Democrats who voted publicly, raised their hand and voted for me. I won 8-4 against our current representative I'm running against for a state house. I actually beat her in a one-on-one in a charter commission this year as vice president, which was kind of a cool experience, especially in a group of Democrats who crossed party line and voted for me. And that just gives you an example of what it takes in our district, but it takes years of standing on these principles and then they learn to trust you.
So what would you attribute that win to? So, I mean, is it just sticking to constitutional principles with a group of Democrats who
I stick to constitutional principles with everybody I talk to, and how I view the limited role of government. I even had our current representative's campaign chairman 2 years ago jokingly walked up to me and we had a fun conversation, and then he looks at me and goes, "So what's your position on A?" "Nah, never mind." He goes, "If I read the Constitution, I know what your position is going to be." As he walked off laughing, which admittedly, that's my position. Sometimes it's not popular. Even for me, there's portions of the state constitution, like the section in here on public funding for private schools, if there's religious instruction, it's prohibited. I get a lot of flack within the conservative movement because I won't support vouchers. Not because I'm against vouchers, but because the state constitution specifically prohibits it in our constitution. Now, I would like to change that, but that's the way the current constitution reads, and I have to comply with that.
All right. And what are the issues important to your district, and how do you incorporate those in your campaign?
This year is unique. I'm turning into a rock star. So the issues that I'm dealing with is shaking hands with a lot of people who like me and see me. They wave and yell at me. They go by my street in front of my house and honk and wave at me. People I never know who they are. It's the issue. What was the question again? I forgot.
Oh, just what issues in your district are important to people you talk to?
They're done. They're done and fed up. They're seriously looking for a place to vote different than their party affiliation that they believe can win. In this district, the Republicans haven't won in 50 years, but Jesse Ventura won in 1998 with 38.5%. And we have a three-way race going right now in this district. I'm telling people there's a historical fact that a non-Democrat Republican has won in this district. And the people are jumping on board. I have a lot of Democrats in my district, especially in Columbia Heights, who are coming to me now and saying, I'm voting for you this year. I had a cop tonight. I was at the police reserve meeting tonight, and our sergeant said, I'm voting for you this year, Tim. Now, I've known this guy for 7 years. For him to sit in a public group there and say that he's voting for me I'm excited. I'm not going to brag, I'm not going to name his name, but when he votes, he's going to be voting for me this year. So it's kind of cool. Those are the types of things that happen to me every day in the district that just haven't happened before.
I think we asked the question of Camden. How would you differentiate yourself from Camden? We asked him how he would differentiate himself from you. So what would be your opinion on that, knowing that you're in the general election together?
Experience. I'm 57 years old. I've been through a lot in life. I've completed my career, my occupation. I retired early in construction. I'm free of debt and ready to serve at the state level as a constitutional candidate with the principles of going. And I could tell people, I'm going to have to find myself on both sides of the aisle. People say, who are you going to caucus with? I'm caucusing with the Constitution and anybody else who wants to join me. I have history in our district. I have respect from the far left and the far right in our district. Those are distinguishing differences because I've taken what you learn in life and actually applied it, found out what works, what doesn't work. I've taken this Constitution for 7 years and applied it politically in our district. And I've won over a lot of people who, when I first met them, didn't like the air I breathed because they thought I was too conservative. I got the Libertarian Party endorsement a few weeks ago, and a big discussion was homosexual marriage and abortion, and I didn't change my position. And they recognized that liberty really is liberty, and you should be able to have your views, even though you're not going to agree on everything.
What number was your district before? Redistricting?
58.
58?
58 prior to 2 years ago. And when the Supreme Court was going through the redistricting process, I actually filed an amicus curiae brief, I think is what it's called, with the Supreme Court telling them to stay out of the redistricting process because it quoted the Constitution. The Republican Party lawyers filed a counter to that and said, just ignore Tim, even though he's right, ignore him. And the Supreme Court just made a ruling that they said, well, yeah, Tim, you are correct that we don't have any legal authority, but for the greater good of society, we're going to go ahead and redistrict. Now, I'm looking forward to getting elected in office because I, as a representative under our state constitution, have the authority and responsibility to file impeachment against judges who make decisions in direct violation of our state constitution. We don't do that now because we're so hooked into this party structure system. We need outside party candidates to win to be able to represent this Constitution because it's not going to be properly represented within party structures.
Great. Any other questions for Tim?
The Met Council runs up against constitutional barriers in that there's some who think it's an unconstitutional entity, and some think that there's a little caveat in there that allows them to exist beyond the scopes of how they were initially created, and that is water and sewer. What is your view on the Met Council?
I believe that the federal government had no business instituting by decree from the federal level to even institute this process. I was, in high school when it happened, and I was living out in California, and it happened across the country. It wasn't just Minnesota. I understand we have to have regional sewer and water systems. The state can do that, or a regional area, counties can get together and do that on themselves. I have big issues, huge constitutional issues with government mandating, dictating all these rules, decrees like the Met Council. I'm against the Met Council's for sure authority in basically all these areas except sewer and water because that's original. I don't think there's been anything added to that outside of just its own growth as a government agency, and the state going, hey, it's a great idea to have a Met Council do this, that, the other, housing, sidewalks, buses, whatever they come up with. And now we got this billions of dollars worth of light rail that's going on that would be great in a population of a metropolitan area of 20 million people, but we got 3.5 million people in the state. We're trying to build a complex edifice that would be something like out of Chicago, where they got 20 million people living in an area. Who's going to pay for it all? We're not going to be able to pay for it.
They've got a budget that's over $750 million, and they are able to tax the Met Council as an entity. Is that unconstitutional?
They have no constitutional authority to tax. That's up to the state to tax. They don't have constitutional authority. And I would introduce a bill to repeal their constitutional authority to tax. And again, I'm not going to change all of state capital, though. I will be bringing the discussion and the issues to the table to talk about. I'm not going to be restrained by party affiliation to well, you can't talk about that, Tim, and you can't talk about, we'll let you talk about that. No, I'm going to go in there, and there's going to be a lot of unhappy people when I get done. Am I going to make a lot of friends? Yes. Am I going to make a lot of enemies? Yes. I've already done that for 7 years in my district, made friends and enemies both. But at the end of the day, they can't really argue with me because my principles and my positions are based on this Constitution. And people across the demographics understand that this document has a lot of force and power against government, but not against us as people.
Were you approached during this current session by the GOP to run as a Republican instead of a Constitutional Party?
I went to their endorsing convention for this House seat to observe. I asked if I could talk to the delegates to ask them to not endorse. And there was a big hoopla, and they didn't let me speak, but the committee took me out on the side and said to me, if you drop your membership as a Constitution Party candidate, we'll endorse you today and we'll run you as a GOP because we have to have a Republican on the ballot. And I said, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to violate my principles. So I didn't get a chance to speak. The endorsed candidate won by he had to get 60%. That's what he got, was 60% of the vote. Afterwards, he came out and apologized to me for what had happened as far as him getting endorsed. And I said, well, you're running and that's a choice you make. Recently, though, the GOP currently came to one of my staff members from the state level and asked that individual to tell me to back out of the race, so it's only a two-way race. They wanted me to back out of the race. That's not going to happen. But I was asked by the state level GOP leadership to get out of the race this year.
Do you think that you would sway more Democratic voters or Republican voters?
History says I will sway 2-to-1 for Democrats in our district. There's a lot of people who are, like I said before, they're Lutherans, they're Methodists, they're Catholics, they're union people, there are a lot of people in the construction industry, a lot of people in public service, but they all have the same fears that the conservatives have, that government's gotten too big.
Why would the GOP want you out of the race then if you're going to pull more Democrats?
I'm being told because they have to have Republicans on the ballot and they want to win, but they have no history of winning. I went back 50 years and checked the records. They would have not won a general election for over 50 years in our district, and we quit looking back after 50 years. We quit looking. I figured 50 years is enough of a history to prove a point. And like I said, Jesse won in 1998 with 38.6%, and he actually got 50% at Anoka County, which was incredible for a third-party candidate. But those are historical values that I bring to the table.
All right. All right. Well, thank you very much, Tim, for your time. I appreciate it. Thanks for
Thank
coming
you,
and staying
guys.
out late.